Fakes a return pass, but instead gives the ball to number 8.
That's where you fell into a trap.
What is good, everybody out there? Thanks again for checking in with Court Thoughts, the channel where we basically talk basketball. Now, it's been a hot minute since I've spoken about anything relating to basketball shoes or sneakers in general, and I wanted to do a bit of a walkthrough about the recent shoes that I picked up to play in and some of the tech involved around it and what sort of drove me into picking these shoes up, and also give you an in-depth view or a detailed analysis on their overall performance. Now, you need to know what shoe I'm talking about. Well, talking about the Nike GT Jump 1. Why I bought new shoes is probably the best place to start off with, right? Now, the last shoe that I was using was the Curry Splash, the Under Armour Curry Splash. Really liked this shoe. It was actually quite reasonably priced as well, and the color was absolutely amazing. It just actually bottomed out. The foam started to soften out a bit too much, and you were actually feeling a lot more of the floor. There was a couple other factors around the shoe that I wasn't overly pleased with in regards to performance, but I needed to look at some new shoes, and I needed to get something that was going to help me with my Achilles tendonitis. Now, this shoe was absolutely fantastic, but as I mentioned, had its time. That was awkward. So I then started to look at some new shoes, and I actually landed on the GT Jump. Now, the GT Jump definitely, I think, has its inspirations between, you know, the Hyperdunk as well as the original Shox. If you liked them, I definitely think visually these are probably going to be something up your alley. But I've only actually put them on in my hardwood floor and just sort of felt the cushioning. Now, as we start to get into the tech component of the shoe, I'm going to start off with the very bottom of the shoe, the sole. The sole is using herringbone, traditional herringbone patterns, really simple, straightforward. You'll notice in the centerpiece of the shoe that the herringbone is going up and down. Fantastic for that braking ability. If you're trying to stop on a dime, it's really going to help. And you'll notice it's got it moving more towards the outsides of the shoe on the lateral and medial ends of the shoe, which is the outside and the inside of the shoe. Again, fantastic for side-to-side movement. The traction on translucent soles is normally not too bad on clean courts. I find that it does pick up a little bit of dust. Personally, I just generally try to stick to things that are herringbone or herringbone-esque. It's just a personal preference of mine. Moving on into the midsole. Now, the midsole is literally this whole section right here that we're going to be talking about. Now, this is where a lot of the money that you spend on the shoe goes into, and you probably thinking, well, how much are we talking about? Now, the price of the shoe is marked at 250 bucks. That's Aussie dollars, and I bought this directly from Nike, this color itself. The midsole is actually where the bulk of your money is going in the way of tech. The midsole, or the middle part of the shoe, is essentially made up of 3 pieces of technology. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is the actual very base of the shoe, and that's that little orange hits right there. Now, I'm going to try and move the camera in nice and close for it. That right there is podular zoom units. Now, we can see by looking at the bottom of the shoe, those red panels, that's your podular zoom. Zoom air is basically high tensile air. There's a lot of tension that's in this airbag, and it's got these little nubs that are in there, and what they do is they compress and then they spring you forward. That's the main sort of principle behind it. This whole shoe's principle, I guess, is to spring you forward. The zoom units are in the heel, and then you have this middle gap that's right there, and then there's another pod unit that's in the front, and these units work directly with the Pebax jump frame. Now, the jump frame is this plastic hard material that you can see there, and basically what that's going to do is very similar to Zoom Air. It's actually going to create tension and sort of propel you forward. The shoe itself doesn't actually really bend all that great. It's actually pretty tough to bend, and what that means is that it's definitely going to load more energy that you put into it in propelling you forward. The shoe does have a pretty good heel to toe transition, so I found that when I was wearing it, again, I haven't actually played in the shoe just yet. I'm going to be playing in it tonight at training, but the shoe itself was super soft. I think it's also got to do that with, in addition to the podular zoom units that you have in the back, as well as the jump frame, you also have a Zoom bed. 2 layers of Zoom that's in the shoe, which is absolutely crazy. It's super comfortable, super responsive, but I've never had anything like this as dual layered. It's pretty nuts. Again, spending 250 Australian dollars, you'd expect all this technology to go into it. And it just looks like something out of like a science fiction movie almost. I was a little bit concerned about the overall appearance of the shoe because I thought that it might be a bit too futuristic, but I think it kind of gets into its own lane, especially when you get these little design hits that are all over the shoe. Like, just look at the inside of the tongue. Bro, that looks so fire. I really do think that the midsole of the shoe is definitely where all the technology is going into, but the upper isn't anything to snub your nose at. The woven material on the upper is where I start to get the reminders of the Hyperdunk. The Hyperdunk was a fantastic shoe for its time, and I was really annoyed that they discontinued the series because it was a fantastic line. I think very much that when you're picking a shoe, you need to consider what you need at the time and what your game needs. And this definitely seems to be leaning towards the things that I do need. Now, not having plush material in the upper is probably where they start to balance things out a little bit more in the weight department. The shoe definitely does feel really bottom heavy. In the back, you can see that in the upper, we've got a collared foam. It's actually pretty soft and super cushy. When I put the shoe on, it felt super plush. It didn't feel cheap, but they definitely reduced a lot of the weight by using this woven mesh in the upper. A lot of the rigidity and support is provided by using reinforced stitch work, so you can actually see that the orientation of the stitch is just going to really create that much more form-fitting feel and just allowing the breathability. We can also see, I think they call this Hyperwire. I can't remember what the technology name of it is. When you tighten these particular wing components up, it's just going to draw the shoe in. It actually has much more of a like a sock liner from the whole top end of the shoe. Right about here, there's actually a cut of the material that starts to sag back into the heel of the shoe where it's a lot more hollow, but the whole tongue is one piece. It's all connected. I can't actually remove the tongue. And I really like that. I find that it makes the shoe feel a lot more snug. The shoe feels super comfortable. The material and technology that's going into the sole gives you this cushy, soft, but responsiveness that I could feel just with the limited movements that I was providing on my hardwood floor. It definitely does feel a little bit higher up, but I didn't feel unstable. I felt super comfortable. But the other thing that I think that people always forget when you're thinning out the top ends of the shoe or the uppers of the shoe is the tongue. And this tongue is actually padded. You can't tell from the image or from the video, but the tongue right here has this extra layer of padding, and I find that this type of little attention to detail is what makes the shoe feel so comfortable. When you have thinner materials in the upper where you're trying to reduce weight, the minute that you start to lock the shoelaces down is where you have a lot more sensitivity on the top end of your foot. You think about it, the very top of your foot, there's really only skin there. And so anything that's, you know, causing a lot of pressure and a lot of discomfort on the top of your shoe, you're gonna notice it. Having that extra layer of material or bedding or matting, whatever you wanna call it, it really made a big difference in the comfort department. Now that I've given you my first impressions and a bit more of a rundown about the technology that's gone into this shoe, let's get into the specifics of how it played. All right, let's get into it. All right, guys, so I've actually worn it for about 2 weeks. Here are my thoughts about how the shoe performed overall. Let's start from the very bottom of the shoe. Traction pattern and everything in regards to the traction was absolutely not a problem. It wasn't actually an area that I thought that I was going to have a problem with, to be honest with you. I mentioned previously that I'm a big fan of herringbone. The only thing that I was a little bit unsure of was the translucent sole, and you can actually see, I'm not too sure if the camera's sort of picking it up, but there is a little bit of frame. I definitely would say you absolutely wouldn't want to be wearing these shoes outside. The shoes are A, too expensive to be taking outside in my opinion, but B, the traction's gonna get absolutely destroyed. Next thing I'm gonna talk about is the midsole. Now, the midsole was actually really comfortable. The midsole itself was very soft. It actually felt somewhat squishy. I wouldn't say that it was like the most responsive feeling. I personally believe that the shoes need to feel comfortable. Big advocate when it comes to buying shoes that they should almost be forgotten about, meaning you don't want to put them on your feet and then start playing in them and then they start to feel annoying or uncomfortable. They start to feel that way, then you're going to be thinking about your shoes and not about the game itself. That was probably the biggest highlight of the shoe, was that it was so comfortable to sort of put in. And even as I broke it down in the next 2 weeks, I didn't feel any sort of lack in regards to the level of cushioning or comfort in stepping in the shoe. It definitely feels super, super plush. Putting the shoe on, stepping onto it, and just the compression rate. One thing that I didn't actually point out, and I didn't really notice it until I started to actually wear the shoe. So if we're looking at the very, very top of the shoe, this little section here, there's actually like a little bit of an outrigger part, this little foam section. It actually did a really good job in regards to keeping me over the footbed. The midsole, like I said, was probably my highlight in regards to the overall feel of the shoe. And yeah, absolutely no problems whatsoever. I definitely think this is probably my favorite part in the whole shoe. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is the upper. Now, the upper is probably the only area that I was a little bit more aware of when I was wearing the shoe. I wouldn't say that the shoe felt tight, but it definitely felt snug. And one of the things that I noticed is that given the amount of containment that the shoe gives you with aspects of these like little wing sections that you have here, which is obviously on both sides of the shoe, as well as the higher nature of the shoe, I felt like my feet were kind of responding to it and feeling much more contained. And I did feel a little bit of a burning sensation in this sort of section of my foot. It wasn't like super uncomfortable, it was just a break-in factor. Once I wore the shoe, you know, for about, I would say probably about an hour, I stopped taking notice of it. But what I did to try and help that was I did have to play around with the tightness of the shoe. I do believe that I probably over tightened it a little bit the first time that I put the shoe on. It's definitely really bottom heavy, but the top didn't feel like it was not supporting me, and it didn't feel like it was too heavy. I felt like it's probably the most balanced aspect in regards to the shoe. I had heard previously on other people's breakdowns in regards to the technical aspects of the shoe that they found a little bit of discomfort in the heel. As someone who has Achilles tendonitis, and I've had a lot of discomfort and pain and issues with shoes, this was absolutely not the case. In fact, one thing I want to point out is the heel counter of the shoe kind of stops in this part right here. The rest of it above it is actually really softly padded, and as well around the actual inside aspect of the shoe, the whole part around there. So it felt super plush. One thing that I would highly suggest is anytime that you are going to buy a shoe, right, you need to make sure that you go in and you actually try them. I mentioned this in a previous video that I did around picking the right shoe for you. It doesn't matter if it's the right color or not. It doesn't even matter if you're gonna buy it from there, but go and try the shoe on. One little detail that I didn't actually point out was the shoelaces. I wouldn't say that they're like super high tech or anything like that, but I do find sometimes with tubular shaped shoelaces, sometimes have a tendency to become undone if they're overly smooth. And that really wasn't the problem with these guys. Overall, if I'm to break these shoes down in regards to, you know, out of a 5, the big thing that I would say that leads me to saying that it is a 5 would be, number 1, it did exactly what I wanted it to. It gave me the level of support and performance that I was expecting. It didn't feel like it was something that I was consciously aware of. If you're looking to try and get something that's really responsive, really comfortable, but definitely doesn't become a distraction on your foot, this is the shoe for you. I don't want you guys to walk away from this and be like, oh my God, Chris thought this was the best shoe, go out and buy it. By all means, if you have been looking into the shoe and you've wanted to know, how the shoe performs, definitely go out, give them a try, and if the technology sounds like it's right up your alley and you think that these things sound absolutely right for you, then go ahead and check it out. I definitely do like a lot of the technology and even just a little attention to details, If it's right for you, go ahead and check them out. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. I'm trying to hit that 10K sub mark, and I could absolutely do with all the love and support from you guys. My intention with shoe videos in the future is to do more of them. Every time that I go to buy a new pair of shoes in regards to performance, I'm going to be doing a breakdown and sort of explain my thinking behind the shoe. I definitely am a sneaker guy, but I wanted to give you guys, the hoop heads, the true hoop heads, an absolute breakdown on one of my favorite shoes that I've had in quite a long time. If you've got some questions about the shoe, feel free to jump in the comments and let me know, or you can go ahead and check out my social media. Great way to get in contact with me, whether you're requesting a player reaction video, whether you want a reaction on yourself, or even if you want a video done on a particular topic, go ahead and let me know. But that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for kicking it with your boy. And until I see you next time, make sure you're looking after yourself, take care, and be safe. All right. Peace.